Kia ora. Welcome to Conversations with Wahine, brought to you by the Wellington branch of the National Council of Women, New Zealand.
Hi everyone, welcome to today's interview. I'm Ash and I'm joined with the lovely Laura. How are you doing today, Laura?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Pretty good, you know. The sun was shining yesterday, so I'm trying to continue the good vibes from yesterday in today's wet and rain. I'm really excited for today's interview. Today we're joined with Yessenia Sandoval, founder of Endo Warriors Aotearoa. Endo Warriors are a charitable organisation with a mission to raise awareness and provide education on endometriosis and menstruation. Their objectives include enhancing support and medical care for individuals affected by endometriosis, combating period poverty, and offering free products to those in need and more. Welcome, Yessinia. It's lovely to speak to you.
Hi, thank you for having me. Nice to meet you too.
I'm so looking forward to chatting with you because we talked briefly before this and I have endo. So I'm really interested to pick your brain and hear all about the work you do. Can you give us maybe a little bit of a rundown on who you are and what led to you forming Endo Warriors?
I'm Yessinia. I'm a mum of one, and well, I guess I'm more than just a mum. I have other activities as well. But the reason I started Endo Warriors Aotearoa is I was diagnosed with endo when I was 20. So I went through my first pregnancy loss, and that led to them figuring out that I had endo. It wasn't that easy. It was a bit of a journey to get there, but I was diagnosed quite early on. And then from there, I guess it's just been a roller coaster. Like, you know, Ash, it's like a ride that you just can't get off. Sometimes things were really, really good, and then sometimes things were really, really bad. I've had years where I've managed and things have been really good, but I found that as my body changed and as I got older, things that worked before didn't work for me anymore, because I guess my body's changing, hormones and stuff are changing. And then I started Endo Warriors Aotearoa because back in 2019 I had a surgery for adeno. I had to have a hysterectomy. My uterus, one of the linings was consistently shedding, so I had my period for like 7-8 months. And I ended up having to have like iron infusions. I was passing out all the time. I was bleeding at work so much that I ended up having like multiple outfits that looked the same. So when I had to shower and change at work, nobody noticed because there'd been a few times I've been called out and people were like, oh, how come you're in your gym gear? Or how come you've changed? Because I worked in an office and it was just like, oh my gosh. But it got so bad that people in the office knew because sometimes I'd just be lying on the floor because that's all I could do, and things like that. And then so I had this hysterectomy and the surgery didn't go very well. It stopped the bleeding, but because I'd had so many surgeries and unfortunately so many pregnancy losses and damage, it caused so much damage. And then they did it like a C-section because I was considered high risk because of my previous surgeries. And then I got an infection, so that got infected and it got septic. And I was already in and out of hospital. And I remember when they discharged me on a Friday, I said to them, I don't feel good. Please don't send me home again. I'm not ready. And this was my 4th time in since my surgery. And there was this nurse there that I called Mean Nurse because she was just horrible. And she's like, oh, you've just got to go up and just get over it. You're going to be in pain for a while. You just had surgery. Just go home and rest. So I did. I got home and I passed out. I ran the hospital and I was like, I've just passed out. My nephews found me. They're like, it's okay, just rest. And then that night, I woke up and I thought I'd wet the bed and my wound had opened up and there was just blood and stuff everywhere. So I went back into hospital and they were like, oh yeah, we should have done some blood tests on you. You've got an infection. Gave me some antibiotics. After a couple of days, sent me home. I said again, I didn't feel good. Was back in, they're like, oh yeah, those antibiotics aren't working. It's just like, so it was just this horrible time. And being a single mum, I couldn't even look after my son. So he had to stay at his dad's, and I felt really broken. I felt really defeated, and oh, it gets me emotional thinking about it. I felt like I was in this place where like I couldn't be. And my dad, who raised me, he lives over in Masterton, so he'd come over and try and help me, but you know, he had work and stuff like that, and so like I just felt really alone. I didn't have anyone. And then I just decided one day, after being in and out of hospital for 6 months and just being passed around so many specialists, that I didn't want other people to go through this like I did. I wanted them to know that they weren't alone, and things like that. And there were other endo support groups, but I didn't really feel like I fitted in. And then the ideas that I had, I wanted to help people, they didn't want to do them because I wanted to support all genders and stuff like that. And then so just one day I decided I'm just going to start a Facebook group and just see if people want to chat. That turned overnight into like a New Zealand wide kind of thing. And then I was like, what can I do to help people? I already had some people that knew about me because of my fertility journey. I've always been quite open about things. So I had been really opened around for 5 years about my fertility journey and all the losses and the IVF and stuff like that. So a few people already knew me from that, and it just kind of took off from there. Really, yeah. So that's how it started.
Wow. I mean, thank you so much for sharing that, because it's such a personal story. And I know it's, even if it's just elements of it, will resonate with so many people listening. And I know even things you said, you know, I count myself quite lucky. I've had a more straightforward endo journey than a lot of people. But, you know, even things you've said there around that dismissal of your pain is unfortunately seems like a rite of passage that it shouldn't be when it comes to endometriosis. You just spend so long getting your pain dismissed and being told to, you know, just go home and rest and, you know, kind of get over it. And there's something serious going on, and that expectation on women in particular to just continue on about their day. You know, you're a mother as well, you have a full-time job, and all this time you have this debilitating pain, and it is isolating, it is really isolating. And there was times where I almost, I don't know if you found this, but I wondered, was I exaggerating it? I was like, you know, maybe everyone does have bad period pains and I'm just being a moaner. Um, so, you know, and there was a real feeling of validation for me when a doctor finally was like, this is not normal. Like this is nothing to be dismissed.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you know. I think like even in school, like I remember like my periods were quite bad, and I remember going to my teacher one day, and my PE teacher, and I said to her, I can't do this. I'm in so much pain. I've got my period. And she said to me, just put a tampon in and get over it. This is going to be the rest of your life. And no one wants to hear another woman complaining about their periods. And I was raised by my dad, so like I didn't know much about periods. So I was like, okay, well, maybe this is what everyone goes through. Like, why am I complaining? And then all the pain that happened outside my period and stuff like that. I thought that was normal because I didn't know any different. I thought that, you know, I believed what this woman teacher had said to me. And so then from the get-go, I was just like, well, this is, you know, everyone puts up with this so much better than I do. Why am I making such a fuss about things? And yeah, and the unfortunate thing is that even when you get diagnosed with endo, it's not like, yay, you know, I've got this diagnosed, but then you still get just treated just as bad. Because, you know, it's like, oh, well, now you've got this. Well, we know what's wrong with you, so we're not even going to worry now. We know that's just your endo. Like the amount of times I've been told, oh, that's just your endo. That's just what you have to live with now. It's like, well,
Yeah.
surely that can't be the case.
And it's that thing of, well, you know, it depends on your employer as well. It doesn't necessarily mean, oh, you have a diagnosis. I mean, this isn't something that's going to flare up once or twice a year. This is every month you are going to have to endure this. Is your employer going to be supportive? Can you take leave? Can you afford to take sick leave? Yeah, it is something you have to live with forever, but not in the way people expect you to. And I think there's a lot of work that's needed in not only society but in our workplaces to support people going through this, you know, chronic illness.
work thing, and that's the thing, I've spoken to so many people that are scared to tell the employees because they don't want to get passed over for promotions, or they've been told they can't have any sick leave, or anything like that. When I worked before my surgery stuff. I was working for the Wellington City Council, and I was really fortunate that I had a really good boss and understanding where once they knew that my endo and how much problems it was causing, they just said to me, look, we're going to work around you. You just take time off when you need it if things are going, and things like that. So I was quite fortunate. But I've been in situations before where I've been told, like, you're going to lose your job, you're going to do this, sort of thing. And it always made me real hesitant to try and further my career because I felt like I had this barrier, and I had this mentality for such a long time that I was broken, that what use am I going to be, like how can I be this career person if I can't even like show up to work every day?
Yeah, it's tricky because I know like a lot of people, mine started very young. I mean, I always had very severe periods, and I got my period quite young. I think I was only maybe 11 when it started. And like that, regularly each month I was missing days of school because I was just too sick. And you have that guilt of, am I just exaggerating it? And then the school is kind of looking at you thinking you're just pulling sick days, and then you're missing out on class. And, a lot of doctors, if they do recognize you're in pain from your periods, they will offer you the pill. But then you have a lot of parents who are very hesitant, especially when it comes to girls, are just like, no, the pill means they're going to go out and have sex and they're going to get pregnant. And there's just, it's really hard when you're very young. I think, at least as an adult, I had that autonomy to go and have those conversations, but I remember it being quite hard as a teenager to navigate.
Definitely. I get lots of parents and teenagers reach out, where their schools just aren't supporting them. Like, I remember we had one where she was told she can't use the sick room anymore, and she wasn't allowed any more sick days from school, and they got letters from doctors and explained what was going on, and they just didn't believe her. And the thing is, like, when a person has their period, even a normal, what we would classify a normal period, you get really low moments because you're bleeding. There's a different sort of phases of the period where you're low energy and you're really struggling already, so it's hard to concentrate. And when you're bleeding more, like what we consider a heavy period, and like you're passing clots, or sometimes getting your period 2 or 3 times a month, or 2 times within a short period sort of time frame and stuff like that, you're already getting like more lethargic. And then each month, it's getting worse and worse, and you're getting more lethargic, and you don't know about like iron levels and things like that, plus the constant hormone changes. And then you're right, a lot of doctors these days, and we see it all the time, they're just putting IUDs or putting kids on contraceptive, and some of these people aren't even like sexually active, and they're not thinking about the bigger picture. If you start contraceptive at 11, you could be on that till your mid-20s. That's over 10 years, and they're not thinking about the long term of what that could do to your body. Something I'd really like to see is doctors being held accountable when they're putting people on contraceptive, explaining, yes, this could help this, but these are the long-term things it could do to your body, and then actually having to check in with that person every couple of years, because that's what happened to me. I was put on contraceptive when I was in my 20s, and things like that. I didn't think anything of it. It wasn't until my 30s where I started wanting to come off it, to have kids, and things like that. Or I did chop and change a little bit, and it just caused so much damage already. It made things so much harder for me, and I didn't know about that stuff. And that's the stuff that we should be educating people on as well.
Yeah, and I think this is also why what you are doing is so important, speaking about it and teaching people at the end of the day about all of these things that normally a doctor should tell them about, but they don't. So someone has to do it. So I think this tells us how and why this is so important of what you do. But just taking a little step back, because maybe not all of our listeners are very familiar with endometriosis. So can you tell us a little bit about what endo is and why it's so disruptive for someone's life?
Yeah, sure. So endometriosis, or endo for short, is where tissue similar to the lining of the uterus grows outside your body. Now, this has been found on pretty much all the organs in people's bodies. I think there's maybe 2 organs it hasn't been found on. It's either been found on the brain, and things like that. So it grows outside the body, and then because that tissue is similar to the lining of your uterus, each month when your uterus builds up for either to have it be pregnant or have its period, that tissue that's all around your body that's growing in different places does the same thing. So it builds up all this blood, but because it has nowhere to escape, like the period that comes out, this doesn't. So what it does is it bleeds inside you. So the bleeding happens inside you, and if you've got it, for example, I've got endo all over my bowels, I've got endo on other parts of me and things like that, like in scar tissue. So that builds up each month, and then there's nowhere for it to go. So you're basically bleeding internally, and that's what causes inflammation and all that pain, because you're bleeding internally, and there's all this blood that has nowhere to escape, and it's really painful. So you throw in things like you've got your period on top of that, and then all that pain, and then all that bleeding and inflammation, and then when you've had surgery, you've got scar tissues and things like that, which usually endo will start to grow around those, and then scar tissue can become very sticky, so that can make things. So for example, even though I don't have my uterus, one of my ovaries was stuck to my bowels for a very long time, and I had a 7-centimeter cyst on there, which the hospital deemed not to cause any pain. They just said, oh, we don't think that's what's causing pain, when it was. And all those sort of things that tie in with each other. So endo is just as common as asthma and diabetes. The stats say it affects 1 in 10 assigned female. We don't have any stats or research done in New Zealand because there's no funding for it here in New Zealand, and basically no one seems to care, is what comes down to the honest truth about it. So a lot of the information we go off is from like Australia and stuff like that. There's some research out there that shows it's more 1 in 7 that have endo, and that can take from the moment you start having pain and you go to that doctor the very first time to when you're officially diagnosed is 10 years. So it can take 10 years for someone to be taken seriously and be told, okay, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to find out what's going on, have a surgery and diagnose it. So we believe that if we start to take teenage symptoms like the period pain and all the other symptoms that come like with endo more seriously, then we could start diagnosing people earlier and hopefully helping them to sort of learn to manage and have one good surgery and things like that as well.
Wow.
Oh, sorry. I don't know if you know this. I'm just curious from what you said. Do you know how common is it to get scar tissue in your brain? And could that cause any, I don't know, neurological effect?
I don't know about scar tissue in the brain. Scar tissue usually will happen around the place of surgery. So with endo, surgery is usually done by keyhole, where you have it's like 3 to 4 keyhole parts, like little incisions done. So that's where the scar tissue will be. So it's usually around like uterus and stuff like that. I had surgery from a C-section, so I have a scar that's this big that goes across, and so I've got lots of scar tissue, and under my scar there's a big lump that you can feel, which they've told me is like an adhesion, and like there's probably endo growing inside of that. I assume maybe if you have like brain surgery or something like that, that could cause scar tissue, but I don't think you could get it from your endo, no.
And I wanted to kind of touch on what you said about the lack of research and kind of investment in New Zealand into endo. And I know one of the things that Endo Warriors provides are packs to people who have endo. Can you talk a little bit more about what those packs are, and how many you distribute each year, who can access them, that kind of thing?
So there's surgery care packages, and I started them up because I've been in hospital so much, and there's so many times where I just thought, man, I wish like someone just sent me a card or something, you know. But people got so used to me being in hospital that it was just part of my normal, like, so it wasn't a big deal. And then I just thought about surgery and like things I wish I would have had at home. So in the packs, they have different things. They usually have like a toothbrush and some toothpaste, lip balm, and things like that you can take to hospital, some moisturizer cream and things like that. Then we put lots of different things, and then it depends what we have available. We had for a couple of months, we had some Endo Soothe, which is a really nice soothing balm made by someone that has endo. So we have those that go in there. Coffee keep cups, little toiletry bags with little plastic bottles so you can take the toiletries. We usually put a list on our website of things that we have so people can pick things that they want. So we're not just sending stuff out and they're like, oh, we wouldn't use this sort of thing. We have hair towels in there, body wash, exfoliating stuff, hair masks. It's just really whatever I find on special and what I can buy at a good price to help pack up the packs. We try to make them, you know, as filled of nice stuff as we can, and things like that. We even we did last month a whole month on social media around sex and endo, which can, you know, people with endo quite often have painful sex because of the pelvic pain they experience, and quite often will bleed after penetrative sex. So we had some things like from the Adult Toy Megastore, Love ATMs, I think they're called now, some lube and some little mini like vibrators and things like that, and some No Ugly libido drink. So we put stuff like that in there, and it's not obviously after you've had surgery you don't really want to have sex, but it's things that you might want further down the line, and things like that, and just, you know, trying to let people have like just nice little gifts. Most of the stuff we source we have to pay for. We do get some things donated, but since COVID, to be honest, it's been really hard to get donations. So we buy it, and we send on average anywhere from 40 to 60 boxes a month. And it just depends. Like, so as we get closer to Christmas, sometimes it gets quieter with the boxes. Some months we send out a lot more, and we send those all over New Zealand. I do get requests from like Australia and the UK. I've even had quite a few requests from the USA, and we can't send them overseas. It's way too expensive, and I feel really guilty. And I have to email those people, and sometimes they come back and be like, "Why don't we pay for postage?" Like, postage is going to be $90. I'm like, you're better just put that money and buy yourself some nice things. I know it's not quite the same, but we get lots of really lovely feedback from the boxes. People really feel seen, and like they're like, it's so nice to come home to this box, or, you know, they get really excited, and, you know, we get little photos. We put these little night lights, these little yellow duck night lights in the boxes. You know, we had people in hospital, you know, sending us photos or tagging us with their little night light. And it's all things that I think about, like what I would have liked. Like, I find it really hard sometimes to sleep in the hospital, and you don't want to have all the lights on. So I was like, oh, it'd be nice to have like a little night light there, something cute and stuff like that. So yeah. And so all over New Zealand, anyone having surgery for endo or endo related surgery.
That's such an amazing initiative. And I think you're right. It's that idea of being seen. It's really nice, because I know when I had the surgery, I hadn't been living in New Zealand long, so I didn't have a big network of people around me. So something like that can mean so much to people. If anyone listening wants to donate, is that possible? Like, can you give donations towards the packs?
Definitely. So people can donate money towards the packs and put in like the reference surgery packs, so we know that's specifically for that. We have some people that just have like a lot of toiletries that are brand new that they don't end up using, especially over Christmas. They get given lots of like different creams and stuff like that, which they're not going to use, face products or bath bombs. we'll take all of those. Anything like that, we're happy to take. Or if people want to buy things, you know, or donate samples, you know, from their work or places like that, we'll take anything. We're always open to any donations that we can get.
And are these the same type of boxes that you send to schools as well?
For the schools, we do period products. So we don't do the surgery boxes for schools, but we do have people as young as 12 having endo surgery that we send boxes to. And generally when I find that we're doing it to someone like under 14, under 15, I sort of amp up that box a bit more. So usually I'll reach out to the parents that have requested the box or something like that and ask like what's their favorite color, what sort of lollies do they like, and sort of things like that, and just put a few more things in there. Just like, I think it's really important, like when you're that young and you're going through that much pain, to remember that you are still a child, you're still a teen, and it's okay to, like, you know, try and like enjoy yourself. So we try and put lots of like nice mindful sort of teen journals and stuff like that in those boxes as well. But for the schools, we do education, so we do more period products and stuff in schools than the care packages, but we do talk about endo and stuff at school.
What made you think about doing this in schools?
Just to really reach people and have them understand what endo is. So we call it period education. I never had any education around my periods. When I got my period, I thought I was dying. My dad is from Chile. He's a refugee. He came here and he raised us by himself. My mum left when we were a baby. So I didn't know anything about periods. I remember hearing people talk about periods at school, but I thought they were referring to like the class, because we used to call our class a period, you know, what period have you got next, sort of thing. And I was like, oh wow, lots of people like have periods. So like I didn't know what it was. And then when I started bleeding, I just remember being really scared and thinking, oh no, like I'm gonna die. Like, how can I tell my dad that I'm dying? Like, you know, like he loves me, he's gonna be heartbroken, sort of thing. And then it went away and I was like, yay. And then it came back and I was like, oh no. And so like I just thought, you know, like I wish I would have learned more. I went to a Catholic girls' school where they didn't talk about periods or anything. So and yeah, and so that's why I go to schools and teach about it. And in those classes we talk about all the different things that can happen with periods, the different colors of bloods, the clots, the what's heavy, what's not, signs to look out for. So I usually talk about endo, polycystic ovaries and fibroids, but I just touch on them very lightly, sort of thing, and we offer more information. And I just think it just helps educate students on what's going on, and it's also breaking down that stigma of it's okay to talk about your period, it's okay to ask each other advice and things like that. And often, you know, I've gone and taught students as young as 8 or 9, and some of them already have their periods. So it's really cool to hear from them about like things that they use and stuff like that. And we take all the products along as well, so kids can feel it and touch it, teens can feel it, you know, cups and stuff like that. We talk about how they're all used and things like that. And, you know, I've had some parents come to the classes because they were dead set about their children not attending the class, so they thought they will attend as well. And I remember afterwards, this mum came up to me and she said she learned so much. She learned so much. She'd come from a culture where they don't talk about their periods. They didn't know lots of things, and she'd come because her husband had said she had to because he wasn't very happy about the daughter being in the class and blah, blah, blah. But she said she learned so much, and she was just like amazed by all the products. And one of the hardest things about the classes are every class that I've done, guaranteed there's at least 1 or 2 students that come up to me afterwards that are having problems with their periods. We had one girl that was bleeding for 3 months and just thought it was a normal, another one that was constantly passing clots and stuff like that and pain. But there's always someone. So that's another reason I do them, because there's always someone in that class that is struggling, and until we've had that conversation, they didn't realize that it was okay to talk about it and ask for help.
I think there's still so much shame attached to periods, and you know, as a teenager, it's a really difficult, self-conscious time And then when you also have something that has still got that stigma attached to it, I can imagine it can be really hard, especially like that, if you come from a family that don't talk about that and don't have those open conversations. It's scary. I remember getting my first period and I was terrified. And
Yeah,
I know.
that's the thing. There's so much stigma. Sorry.
No, go. Yeah, please.
I was just going to say, yeah, there's so much stigma, but there's so much cultural stuff around it as well. There's so many different cultures that like, I guess, that talk about periods, or like how they do things is different. So, there's cultures that, they can't use tampons or cups or anything like that that's inserted and stuff like that. And then, we have people that come to New Zealand and they want to learn about those things as well and how they work, because they haven't been allowed to use them before. So there's just so much still that seems to be unknown about, periods, that people just don't understand. Like, I remember, like, it wasn't until I was in my mid-30s that I started realizing that for all my exercise and fitness, if I actually started exercising to my menstrual cycle, I could achieve so much more. And it was a game changer for me. And I was like, how did I not know this for so long, that my menstrual cycle affected the way of my exercise and my fitness and how I'm going to, like, be able to do things.
Yeah, I think that's a part of period education that's been skipped over in schools a lot, because I remember being told in schools, yeah, your period follows a 28-day cycle. That's what you were told. But no one actually explained what that cycle meant and how it wasn't just, the focus was on the period section and actually, menstruating that week. But I mean, your body's going through completely different changes day to day, every month. And you're completely right. If you can learn to identify your cycle, it's a game changer when it comes to exercise, even like socializing, everything. Yeah.
Definitely. And we go over that in the classes. We talk about the different, phases of the cycle in the 28 days and, what sort of exercise is best in each. And especially when I go to colleges, we touch on it and I'm like, if you're quite into fitness and stuff like that, then this is something you should be researching and being aware of, because it'll help you, like, further your fitness sort of thing like that. If you're, instead of doing cardio or boxing and something high intensity at this stage, this is where you want to do something more yoga or low impact, and then you'll be able to bounce back a bit quicker and not burn out. Because like, I was doing high intensity training for so long, and when on my period doing high intensity, and I would just get to the end and I'd be like, why am I so tired? Like, I'm struggling, like I'm going to pass out. It's like, because I shouldn't have been doing it at that certain time of my period. That's when I needed to slow down. But you're right, like, that's just things that people don't know. And until you actually start learning about it or look into it, like, you just wouldn't know. And that's why I go to schools and hopefully try and help people, like, oh right, this is, my period's much more than just seven, I say that lightly because everyone's different, days of bleeding.
We saw recently as well that the government has said that they will commit 2.9 million to continue to provide free period products to schools. Was this something that you were kind of campaigning and pushing the government to do? Because I can imagine you must have a lot of students you could come across in schools who that's a real barrier, where they can't afford or don't have access easily to period products.
We were part of that campaign that was mostly headed by the Period Place. Danica, who runs the Period Place, who is amazing, was a big push when that first started. And we love that there's period products in schools. I also have an issue with there being period products in schools, because a lot of the schools, they hide them. So instead of just putting them out in the bathrooms for people to have, some schools do, but some schools don't. And quite often when I go to schools and do period education, I'm like, do you have period products? They're like, yep. Where do you keep them? In the office. And I'm like, awesome. So someone's bleeding in class, they've got to ask to leave class, then they've got to go to the office while bleeding. Can I have some pads? Sure. Here's one pad. Then they've got to go to the toilet and then come back. Can I have another pad? And stuff like that. Or they might give them 3 or 4. But what I try and tell schools is that if you have someone at school that's struggling to afford these period products, they probably have people at home. Just put out whole packets. And I'm like, they're not going to sell them on Facebook Marketplace. They're not going to steal them. like if they need them, they need them. And over Christmas, we get inundated with people needing products because the schools haven't given it to them to take home. So that's something that we're working on now, is just reaching out to schools and being like, hey, we know the holidays are coming up. Here's something to think about, you know, because often schools are left, you know, with some pads, and so they donate them, which is great. And there's quite a lot of schools out there that do have them out in their bathrooms and are very open about them, or have them in their nurse's office, which is fantastic. But there is still that stigma around the periods, and they're like, oh, but we don't want, you know, the boys playing with them and thinking they're toys. I'm like, well, educate them on what they are. They're going to have someone in their life that bleeds, so that has a period. So why not teach them now? So when they're in a relationship with maybe with someone that gets a period and they have to go and get products, it's not embarrassing or like a big deal. But I do love that products are in school, and it is really good for students, helping them, you know, sort of have that what's available and what they need. Sorry, that period products are in school. I do love it, but I feel like there's still work there that needs to be done. Like, can some of that money be invested in reusable products? If we're to give someone a period cup, that'll last them 10 years, and then they're never put in this period poverty situation again. Period underwear, you know, it's an investment, but if we give students period underwear, it'll last them 3 to 4 years. Like, can we do things there? And that's what I would like to see change. Like, some of that money being invested in reusable products and being right, let's help them be out of period poverty and stuff, you know, for the next 5 to 10 years.
And we spoke a little bit about the diagnosis before, and overseas, on average, it takes about 10 years, I think you said, from the development of symptoms until you get a diagnosis. Do you feel that this is reflective in New Zealand? And also, what steps do you need to go through to get a diagnosis?
I think in New Zealand it's probably a lot longer, to be honest. I've talked to people that have, you know, been 20 years. I think, unfortunately, the thing with endo and our medical system at the moment, and this isn't a dig at like specialists or gynecologists, the medical system in New Zealand at the moment is, as a whole, is broken. They're understaffed, they're underpaid, and that's just putting a hold on everything. And, you know, during COVID, it was like, oh, but it's because of COVID. We're years past COVID now, and the system's still broken. Like, we can't keep blaming COVID and stuff like that. Like, there has to be some accountability. And so I think with the diagnosing, it's a real hit and miss, because unfortunately, when you go see a doctor, it comes down to the luck of the draw of whether that doctor's going to listen to you and take you seriously, or whether they're going to be like, we've got 10 minutes.
Yep.
Here's, you know, go lose some weight, go drink some water, go do some yoga. Like, you know, they're not really looking at the core issues. And then the other problem is, a lot of people, when they go to the doctors, they don't see the same doctor. So they're seeing all these different doctors. So they're not building a relationship with a doctor, and that doctor's not actually getting to know them. So my main doctor, I've been seeing for well over 10 years. She is my go-to. My specialists at the hospital, they talk to each other, which is amazing. When I need to see like a different doctor, I have a couple of other doctors that I see, but she is my main go-to, and they know, and they will go to her. But for a long time, I was seeing just different doctors, and that didn't help me. And I think that's one of the issues that we have in New Zealand, that it's so hard to get a doctor's appointment, that you don't always have that same doctor. So I think for people wanting to be diagnosed or be taken more seriously, find a good doctor and invest in only seeing, if you can, that doctor, or at least 2 in that medical centre that will get to know you. A lot of people say to me, oh, how do I get my doctor to listen? They're not taking me seriously. If you're explaining to them what you're going through, and you're telling them all your symptoms and all the pain, and they're still brushing you off, the advice I give you is get another doctor. You're not going to change that doctor's mind. They're not going to listen to you. They've already made that decision that you were too much hard work. And I had a doctor just earlier this year tell me, and it was the first time that I saw her, she said, I'm not going to be able to fix you. You're quite a difficult case, you know, like, I'm not quite sure what you want me to do here. And I was like, well, I want you to listen and I want you to do something to help me. This is what I want. And I had to be real stern. And then I wrote to the medical centre and be like, I never want to see that doctor again. When my blood results come in, do not send them to her. I will see someone else, because my doctor's not always available. So like I said, I have a couple of doctors that I see. But in regards to getting diagnosed, like, I think it's really important for people to keep a journal of what they're actually going through. This not only helps you, but it will help them see what's going on when you go in to see them. If you start keeping a journal, you'll start to see over 2 or 3 months, even 6 months, you'll see things that are happening around about the same time, usually throughout the month, and it will really help you understand your pain and when your worst days are. Or maybe something that you're eating quite regularly that's flaring you up more. So before my hysterectomy, I stopped eating red meat, because I realized that every time I ate red meat, my tummy would swell up and I'd get my endo belly, which it swells up, I'd have more inflammation and I'd feel real sick. And I don't know why, but it was something just in the red meat. And I remember reading up about it. And so I stopped eating it. And that made a huge difference for me. Now it doesn't make a difference whether I eat red meat or not. I still have my pain. But keeping those sort of track of those things in your symptoms, like a symptom diary, will help with being diagnosed as well. But the most important thing is having a doctor on your side that will actually listen to you. Unfortunately, at the moment, a lot of hospitals are understaffed and have massive wait lists. Like, I think in Wellington, to see a pelvic physio, it's still like well over a year to be seen. I know I waited 18 months to be seen, and it's not because of the pelvic physios, it's because they only had 2 there, and stuff like that. In Wellington, the hospital were sourcing out, so they were having patients go to a private clinic, but that's now stopped. So the wait list is going to be 18 months to 2 years again. And same with seeing a gynecologist. Some hospitals just aren't even taking referrals. So that puts an even bigger delay on someone being seen and possibly having surgery or getting help. So I think until the hospitals staff better, and we're looking after our doctors and our specialists a bit better, things won't change. But we're saying that there's also some doctors out there that are just dicks and assholes, and they will just be rude and they will not care. I had a doctor put on the official record that I was dramatic, and then I did a complaint, and he's like, well, that's medical lingo. And I was like, you're an asshole, sort of thing. Like, like, we're not seeing each other again. I've had a specialist in the hospital like do these tests for me, and I'll be like, that hurts, stop. And he was like, I don't believe you're in pain, because if this really hurt, you'd be actually screaming and in tears. And I ended up crying, and then I walked back in and I was like, you cannot speak to me like that. You don't know the person's mental health and what they're going through. What you said to me was wrong, and I told you that I am actually in pain all day. His boss actually ended up coming in, and we talked about it some more. And I think the more you advocate for yourself, the more help you will get yourself. And that's quite hard to do, because the more you advocate, some doctors just either want less to do with you, because they're like, oh, she's just so pushy, which is what I've been told. But, like, that's how you get things done if you don't advocate for yourself. So, yeah, I find the whole medical thing, it's real hit and miss. Sometimes it's just the luck of the draw. If you get a really good doctor, then, things could change. But if not, 10, 20 years down the track, you're still fighting for answers.
It's so frustrating, because it's a common thing I think women experience in the medical system, is just that dismissal of pain and just being expected to get on with it and just not being heard. I think, unfortunately, your experience is not in isolation. And it's hard, because I've had some doctors, the doctor that eventually did diagnose me with endo, I mean, immediately she was like, you've endo. Like, well, of course you've endo. She's like, I can't believe no one's picked this up, and was just such a big advocate for me. But then I have also been told, take a Panadol and get on with it. So it is, it is unfortunately the luck of the draw. But I think, the work you're doing to start educating from a school age and from, you know, primary and secondary schools gives children and young people that vocabulary so that they're not like, you know, I was in my 30s Googling what the hell is endo. They have that knowledge and they can advocate for themselves. I think that's really important. I also wanted to ask you. Yeah, please go.
I was going to say, like, you have surgery and then you're diagnosed. They don't actually give you any information.
Yeah.
Or like where you can go for help. They're like, yep, you have endo, you've had the surgery, go home and recover, and that's it. You know, it's like, well, what happens now? Like, what do I do with the pain? Like, oh, it's just drives me crazy.
And I wanted to ask about managing the pain, because I've heard of some people using different things. I know you talked about cutting out red meat, and I know diet often has a big play in endo and can really affect people. I've also heard of people using things like CBD to manage endo symptoms. Is that something you've come across much?
Yep. So I am a big advocate for medical cannabis and CBD. We actually did some research earlier this year, late last year, on CBD medical cannabis on 30 patients that have endo and pelvic pain, and it showed amazing results. It's just waiting to be peer reviewed, but because it's medical cannabis and stuff like that, people don't want to touch it. So we can't even release how amazing it's been or officially really talk about like the results, because it has to be peer reviewed by a research person, and it's just been sitting there months. So I'm a big advocate for medical cannabis and CBD. It's not as hard as people think to get on. I go through Canna Plus. You can do online appointments or in person if you're near one of their clinics, and they are fantastic there. They know a lot about endo. The nurses that work there, one of them used to specialize being an endo nurse, and they will help get you on your journey, whether that's CBD or CBD and medical cannabis. When things got really bad for me after my surgery, I had to really work out ways to heal my body. You know, I was on morphine and tramadol every day for years, like so much medication and opioids and stuff like that. And it affected my body. Like, it helped with the pain, but not fully. But then there's all these side effects, like it suppressed my hunger. I was constipated. I was like putting on all this weight. Mentally, it affected me. Then I got PTSD because of my medical. It was a nightmare. So I had to learn all these things of coping with pain. So there's lots of different ways with endo and things that you can do to help manage your pain. But unfortunately, everything is an investment of time. Nothing is going to work straight away, and you need to be able to make sure that you invest that time. So diet, there's so many different diets out there that people could try. Low FODMAP, no meat, keto, and you just never know what's going to work for you and what's not going to work for you. So for me, when I cut out red meat, I started by cutting out sugar out of my diet. It was one of the hardest things that I ever done, because I am a sugar fiend, and I was like drinking like big blocks of chocolates every day, liters of juice. So I cut it out, and like the detox, I went cold turkey for 8 weeks, and then I slowly put it back in. And I can't manage as much sugar as I used to, which is good, but I cut that out. I'm already celiac, so I don't have gluten. So some people with endo, they say like cut out gluten. So there's all these different things. I say start with something small. If you're going to start with trying to cut gluten out, look at how much stuff that you eat that has gluten. And if it's like, if you have like quite a lot of bread or pastries and things like that, then just start cutting back slowly. Don't go cold turkey, because it's going to be hard to just not eat, you know, a pie once a week sort of thing. You know, just cut back a little bit until you're slowly phasing it out, and then introduce gluten stuff to substitute it. Gluten-free stuff to substitute it. Then there's lots of other things that help. So in my 20s and my 30s as well, I used to see a traditional Chinese medicine doctor. That made a huge difference with my periods, and my fertility made a huge difference there as well. No, I haven't done that recently, because it's something I've got to try, but you know, it helped at different stages. Acupuncture helped me for a while. I did that for 6 months. There's there's so many different things, and it's so frustrating because you never know what's going to work. One of the biggest things though that has helped me is something called pacing. So pacing is really important when it comes to endo and things like chronic pain, because someone with endo or chronic pain, you know, our energy levels are different. So there's this thing called the spoon theory, which is basically talks about your energy levels. So for example, everyone in the world every day wakes up with 10 spoons, and you use those spoons for energy. So someone who we would consider like without pain, you know, endo, no pain, things like that, they might use one spoon to get up, have a shower, get dressed, have breakfast, go to work. So they've only used one spoon, so they've still got 9 left. Then they might use 2 spoons to get through the day of work. Someone with endo or chronic pain, just getting up and out of bed might take 3 spoons. You know, I know sometimes just for me to get up, get undressed, get into the shower, dry myself, get dressed again, that can sometimes take me 2 to 3 hours to do, because it's just the amount of energy. Like sometimes I really want to have a bath, but the undressing and getting into that bath and then the energy to get out, it's just not worth what it's going to do to help me versus my energy spent. So it's breaking down things that you do by pacing. And we have got some information on our website on pacing and how you can work it all out. So it's called the boom bust cycle, because quite often people with endo or chronic pain, you'll have some days where you're feeling really good and have lots of energy. So you'll do heaps more, but then the next few days you just crash because you're in more pain because you've done so much more, you pushed yourself. So the idea is on those good days, you don't do more than you usually would. You might go for a little bit longer of a walk, but you don't push yourself too hard. And pacing is all about breaking things down. So say, for example, if walking too much, you start to have pain. So then you work out what your baseline is. And it might be that you can walk 15 minutes before your pain starts to set in. So then for a month or a couple of weeks, you walk 15 minutes, but then you rest for 5 minutes. And then after 2 weeks or a month, you increase it. And then you slowly increasing it. It's like washing, for example. Sometimes I put the washing on the night before. Then the next day I'll carry it downstairs and then hang it out. So I'm breaking it up. Sometimes I do the same load of washing 4 times because I just don't have the energy to take it downstairs, but it's breaking everything down. So pacing is really important when it comes to something like endo and chronic pain. And that's the first thing I say to people: look into this and start implementing this into your everyday life, because you will start to gain more energy in the long run. Yeah, I could talk about that for hours, but I won't.
And I know that Endo Warriors doesn't only advocate for women or people identifying as women, but for all genders. And some people might be on a testosterone therapy because which is usually used for gender transition, and this can influence the symptoms, of course, of endo. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, so when it comes to advocating for all genders that have endo, I admit when I first started Endo Warriors, I didn't even cross my mind, and it wasn't because I didn't think about the rainbow community. I hadn't been put in that position myself. And then I started talking to a younger person that was transitioning, and I think it was like within the first month, and I started learning more about it, and I was like, well, right, I want to support everyone that has endo, no matter what their gender. Now it's really hard and difficult already for a cisgender person to be diagnosed with endo and be taken seriously. So then you throw into the mix someone that no longer identifies as female and maybe transitioning on hormones and stuff like that, and it's way harder. They are treated even worse. And because there's, like I remember this young person, well, he's not so young now, he's probably finished university now, but when I first started talking to him, he was in school, being in hospital and being told by nurses, well, you've made this choice to be on those drugs, they're making your endo worse, so we can't help you, we're not going to do anything for you, and things like, I remember him having a bit of toast for breakfast and this nurse being like, well, you're eating, so you can't be in that much pain, sort of thing, and refusing to use his pronouns and stuff like that. So like there needs to be a lot more done around endo and research, but there also needs to be this research done around endo and those that no longer identify as female and those that are transitioning, and how we can support them with their endo journey. Because simply telling them, you've made this choice to take these hormones, it's going to make your endo worse, we're not going to do anything for you, that's not really good enough, because we're not supporting them and we're not helping them, and a lot of times with endo, people turn to like online forums or groups for help. And when we're using language like this is a woman's illness, this is only affects females, we're just excluding them already. And so there's no place, that it feels isolating already. And that's why we use neutral language when it comes to endo, because we want everyone to feel seen and to be be noticed and know that we support them. And yeah, so there's still a lot of stuff that needs to be done around endo, and especially for those people in the rainbow community.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, yeah, that's something, it's seen as a woman's problem, the endo, that's how it's framed. And I can only imagine, as a cisgender woman, it was hard and isolated and have an endo. So I can only imagine, as somebody transitioning, how much more that must be exasperated. So yeah, just thank you for making it inclusive, and I guess extending your platform to include everyone, because that's not always the case when it comes to things like this. I just really want to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and speak to us so candidly about your story. You've been through so much in your medical journey with your fertility and with endo. And it's not everyone that is comfortable sharing something so personal. So I just really appreciate you sharing that with our listeners. But also I just really want to thank you for taking, all of this negative experience you've had around your medical well-being and turning it into such a positive organization. And I think the endo recovery packs that you give out to individuals having surgery, it's just so beautiful that it's just so inclusive. And I can only imagine how much it's helping anyone receiving that pack when they're facing into the surgery, especially if it's for their first time. It's scary. And to think that you just took a negative experience and have created something so positive to help so many people is a really, really special thing. So I just really want to thank you for all the incredible people you're helping across Aotearoa as part of Endo Warriors. Before we wrap up, if there's anyone listening to this who thinks they may be affected by endo or any other sort of period-related illness, where can they go for help? Or if they've just been diagnosed with endo, and you and I know it can be very overwhelming when you're first told and scary, where can they go for more information and help and support?
Sure. So we've got our website, which has a lot of resources and fact sheets, which people can go to and download. We have a private chat group as well on Facebook that people can join. I always recommend people to follow our Facebook or Instagram, because we're constantly posting information about endo and things that you can do to help your endo, or like period information. So we're constantly putting stuff out there. And they can reach out to us as well. They can send us a DM and or an email, and we can talk to them about what's going on and some ideas. And sometimes we have people just looking for buddies, so we quite often put people together with someone else that has endo, whether it's in the same area that they live in or same age group and stuff like that. So then they've got like someone they can talk to, because sometimes it's just having someone that's going through it or been through it to talk to makes a huge difference. You can talk to your friends and family about it, but until you've really been in that situation, it's really hard sometimes to understand what that person is going through. So yeah, our website is probably the best place to start.
Amazing. Thank you so much for speaking with us today and all the amazing work Endo Warriors are doing. And I'm excited to see what the future holds, because you're a woman on a mission, and I think it's going to get bigger and better.
Hopefully, that's my plan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you later.